Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Inshallah, we will be continuing the series, The Disease and the Cure, by Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah. And actually today we will be concluding the series as well, concluding the book. We glossed over some things, wasn't a comprehensive insight into the book, so I definitely recommend. You can find the PDF for this book online in English, and definitely read it for yourselves just to get the benefit of the work. So just in this conclusive session, we will go over from the beginning some of the main points and the purpose of this book. So first, we spoke about the author himself, Imam Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. He lived in the year 700, around 700 after Hijrah. So 700 years after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and 700 years before us. So right in the middle of the timeline. And he was the student of Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. So very, very strong connection to a very big scholar of Islam. And he himself was the teacher of Ibn Kathir, who we know is one of the most famous tafsirs of the Quran exists, the Tafsir Ibn Kathir. So Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, he had a great teacher and he had great students. He had great parents. He had a great atmosphere around him. He came from a family of scholars. So just from his biography, just from his life, the initial benefit that we can get about the situation is that from good comes good. So if you are trying to establish an atmosphere of good, someone has good parents, good friends, good teachers, good atmosphere, good society, good community, then good comes from that. You get jewels and gems like this man Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, who after 700 years still his works are benefiting the people, and still he is getting good deeds and good rewards in his grave for the works that he has done. And now, the purpose of the book itself, he was asked a question anonymously. He was sent a letter, and in that question, he was asked that how can someone deal with a calamity, something that is overtaking their life, and if it is not cured, or if it's not taken care of, it will destroy them in this life and the hereafter. So we don't even know if the questioner is a man, we don't know if it's a woman, and we don't even know what the problem was. So in a response to that question, he wrote this entire book. And it contains an overall guideline, a summarized guideline of how to deal with different problems in life. Whether that is a physical disease you are dealing with, whether it is a mental disease, and so often as we deal with, whether it is a spiritual disease. And in fact, he was given the title, the doctor of the heart, because of his expertise in dealing with problems of the heart, corruption in the heart, diseases of the heart. And so he wrote this book, and we will go through some of the main points that he mentioned in the entire book. So he begins the book actually talking about the fact that every disease has a cure. So in the beginning, he gives the hope from the hadith of the Messenger ﷺ, in which he told us that for every disease that there is, every disease that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created, He also created a cure for it. So first and foremost, no matter what problem we're dealing with in life, no matter what it is, whether it's a physical illness, it's a mental illness, it's a spiritual illness, or even if it's day-to-day problems in life, there is a solution to it. There is a cure to it. So initially, never ever lose hope in Allah. Always have good thoughts about Allah and know that He has a solution to our problems, no matter what the problem is. Then he goes on and he mentions how ignorance is a disease. So that is a very important thing to understand. That the one who is ignorant, the one who lacks knowledge, especially of this deen, it is a disease. And only when something is treated as a disease do people take it seriously. So for example, if any of us, or if anyone from the community, may Allah protect us, but if someone gets news of a severe disease, cancer, COVID, whatever you want to talk about, immediately they will go to the doctors and they will try to find medicines to cure themselves. They're not going to just leave themselves. They're not going to say, just let the cancer destroy me. Similarly, this ignorance that we have of the deen, if we treated it like a disease, we would feel the sense of urgency. We would feel sick. I don't have enough knowledge, and that's leading me to be diseased. So if we took it from that perspective, we would run to the scholars. We would run to the people of knowledge. We would run to the book of Allah. We would run to the sunnah. We would run to all these things. And of course, that is the cure. And that is the next thing that he mentions, is to understand that the entire Quran is a remedy. It's a cure. The entire book, the entire word of Allah, it is a remedy. And not just a remedy for the heart. It is proven from the sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ that the Quran and the ayat from the Quran have a power to heal physical diseases. It has the power to heal mental diseases. And especially it has the power to heal spiritual diseases. So first and foremost, any problem we're having, any problem in life, even if it's financial, anything, run towards the Quran. Run towards this word of Allah, because it contains a cure for us. And especially some ayat from the Quran, some surahs from the Quran, we are told, Surah Fatiha, Ikhlas, Falaq, Surah Nas, and Ayatul Kursi. These specific surahs have strong power attached to them. If we need protection from diseases, if we need protection from black magic, if we need protection from the evil eye, all of these ayat, whenever we recite them, and it is the sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ to recite these surahs and these ayat every single day. If we hold on to even just these ayat of the Quran, understand them, and apply them in our lives every single day, we will see the cure in our lives right in front of our eyes. The next thing that he discussed was the importance of dua, the power of dua, the power of supplication, and how much power it truly has. It is something that we should not neglect. And in fact, the Sahaba, they used to say that the moment we stop making dua, the moment we stop praying to Allah and asking for His help, that is when we are ruined. And it is even reported that we should make dua even when we are tying our shoelaces. Even ask Allah for help when doing the tiniest task, the smallest task. Constantly be in a state of dua, in a state of supplication. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that deed. As we are told by the Messenger ﷺ, that dua is ibadah. It is worship. It is the core pillar of worship to call upon Allah whenever we are in need of help. And one of the conditions, or some of the conditions of dua to be accepted, that will make it very likely to be accepted, he discussed this as well. And he mentioned that the one who makes the dua must have sincerity. He must be sincere. He must be making dua for something that is allowed, meaning you cannot make dua for something that is haram. So he must make the dua with purity. He must make the dua with vulnerability. What is that? What is this vulnerability? Imagine, and we cannot even compare the relationship between Allah and His creation. But take the example of a baby, a newborn baby. How dependent is that baby on his mother? That baby can't even take one step. The baby can't even feed itself. The baby cannot clean itself. The baby sometimes needs to be rolled over so that it does not choke. It is so vulnerable and dependent on its mother. And now, when it comes to the creation and the relationship between the Creator, times this by 1 billion, infinite times. That is how dependent we are upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the level of dependency that we have. That I cannot even pick up this pen without His help, without His permission. This is how much in need we are of Him. So when we make that dua, when we make that supplication, it should be with this sincere belief that, oh Allah, I am nothing without You. I am completely dependent on You. When we make that dua with that vulnerability. And finally, the dua must be made with trust in Allah. Full conviction that this dua that I'm making, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer it, or He will give me something better than this. This conviction must be in the heart every time we make dua. And inshallah, if we do this, we will see the problems in our lives completely disappear. We will see our mindsets change, and we will see our iman strengthen. The next thing he mentioned was that obedience is the key to success. Obedience to Allah. So this will go into the next part that he mentioned, which is to have good thoughts about Allah and to avoid delusion. Now, good thoughts about Allah, meaning thinking that, oh, Allah is merciful, Allah is the most merciful, He is Ar-Rahman, He is Ar-Rahim, He is Ar-Razaq, He provides. Having good thoughts about Allah, it is a necessity to combine it with obedience. So, take this example. Someone who commits sins openly, and he knows it's wrong, but he will say, oh, Allah is the most merciful, so I will continue to do it. I'm going to continue to do it, and when I die, because Allah is the most merciful, He will forgive me. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim mentioned that this is delusion. This is not a good thought. This is tricking oneself. This is fooling oneself. Because we are told by Allah, we are commanded by Allah that the ones who are successful are the ones who are obedient to Him, the ones who obey Him, the ones who hold on to His commands, and the ones who hold on to His sunnah, the sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ. And so, one way to distinguish what is a good thought and what is a delusion. Am I actually thinking good of Allah, or am I tricking myself? He mentioned one way to distinguish this is that when a thought comes in the mind regarding Allah. So if the thought comes that Allah is Ar-Rahman, Allah is Ar-Rahim, He will forgive me. If the thought makes the person turns toward Allah more, meaning if having that thought makes him want to worship Allah more, obey Him more, leave the prohibitions more, then it is indeed a good thought. But if this thought about Allah's mercy makes him get neglectful, or makes him become lazy, or makes him go do the sin anyway, then this is delusion. He has deluded himself. He has allowed the shaitan to trick him. Because that is not the good thought. The good thought is to obey Allah, and if one makes a mistake, to sincerely repent, not to use Allah's mercy as an excuse to disobey Him over and over and over again. The next thing that the Shaykh mentioned in the book was that the shaitan is a clear enemy, and to imagine as if the believer is like a fortress. Imagine us, our bodies, ourselves as castles. We are fortresses. And the shaitan uses different tactics, different weapons, different strategies to attack this fortress, to somehow enter this fortress. And the core of the fortress is the heart. So his goal is to somehow penetrate into this heart, to break this heart, break down the defenses, and get into this heart and corrupt it. So he will try to find ways to enter. And what are the ways the shaitan tries to enter? First, he tries to enter through the eyes. Whatever the eyes see, he tries to tempt through the eyes. Then he tries to tempt through the ears. He tries to tempt through the mouth. And he tries to tempt through the limbs. The shaitan uses all these different strategies to tempt mankind and to attack us and to break down our walls and to enter our hearts. And one of the biggest things that threaten the soundness of the heart are sins. Constant sins. And from these sins, we discussed that there are levels and types and different levels of severity towards sins. So we have the sins of the flesh, we have the sins of the animalistic sins, we have the prideful sins, we have the devilish sins. We discussed all these. And we mentioned how there are major sins and minor sins. But before we mention that furthermore, let us talk about the example of the Sahaba. That when the Sahaba used to discuss this topic of sins, a lot of the times they did not even get into the discussion of what is a major sin or a minor sin. To them, a sin is a sin. Now there are major sins and minor sins, but their level of iman was so high that they used to say, do not think about the severity or the level of the sin. Don't think of the greatness of the sin, how big or small the sin is. Think about the greatness of the one you are disobeying. So whether the sin is big or small, the Lord is great. He is great. The one who is being disobeyed, He is great. So think about His greatness to put us away, put us off from those sins. And we mentioned some of the worst type of sins. We mentioned shirk being the worst sin that any creation can ever do. It opposes the purpose of life. It opposes tawheed. It opposes the reason that we were born and put on this earth. Then we mentioned the severity of speaking without knowledge. And it comes back to knowledge. The one who speaks about Allah without knowledge, he makes up a lie about Allah, something that is not in the Quran, not in the Sunnah, to talk about Allah in that way. That is one from the gravest of sins. Also to attribute lies to the Messenger ﷺ. So narrating something to him that he did not say. It is one of the greatest of sins that anyone can do. And then we mentioned the topic of bid'ah, of adding on to the religion. Going away from the Sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ. Trying to put additions to the way that has already been established. The day Islam was completely set and sealed. After that day, nothing can change. Nothing can change, and no one can add on anything to this religion. And from sins, we have disobeying the commands of Allah and going away from the things that He has put as pillars of Islam. So we mentioned also from the gravest of sins are to leave off salah, leave off the 5 daily prayers, leaving off the fasting, leaving off zakah, leaving off hajj if one is able to do it. All these things are from the severest of sins. And then we mentioned the following of desires. And one of the biggest of desires that we mentioned was the sin of fornication, adultery, zina. We went into detail in the previous lecture. And we concluded with the point, and Imam Ibn al-Qayyim made this point, that the thing that will triumph all sins, the power that will guarantee success is true love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. True love for His deen. True love for the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he said that in the heart, true love for Allah and love for evil, love for indecency, love for sins, it cannot exist. It cannot exist in the same heart. So one person, he either loves the indecency and the sins and the major sins, he loves all those things, or he loves Allah. It's one or the other. These things cannot mix in the heart. And then he makes a very important point, and this is something to ponder over, that free will and love, they go hand in hand. So we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us with free will. We have the ability to choose what to do. Of course, the result is always in the hands of Allah. But the intention that we make to complete an action, the free will that we have, it is ours. We choose what to do. So the peak, the pinnacle of free will is to freely and out of love obey Allah. Because there is no, right now in this world, it is a testing ground. Right now, I am not being forced to be here. None of you. None of us are being forced to be here. When we stood in the prayer, no one actually took us and grabbed us and made us stand there. What made us come was the love for Allah. Love for our Lord. Wanting to obey Him. That is what caused us. That is what caused the free will to bring us here. It was not any type of force. So the pinnacle of love, the pinnacle of free will rather, is love. And that love, the highest love that we can have for anyone, is the love for Allah. And the love for His deen, and the love for His Messenger ﷺ afterwards. After Allah, then is the Messenger. And we are told by the Messenger ﷺ in terms of love, that none of you will have pure iman. The strongest of iman unless he loves me more than he loves his family and all of the people. So, the purest of love that one can reach is to love Allah and then love His Messenger more than anyone, more than our parents, more than our spouses, more than our children. And that is the level that we strive to reach. The Imam Ibn Qayyim mentions that the ones who reached the highest level of love were the prophets. And they were so motivated by their love and obedience to Allah that every step was for the sake of Allah. This is why they were prophets. When they would sleep for the sake of Allah. They would sleep for the love of Allah. Then now I must rest so I can wake up in the morning and worship Him more. Then they would get out of bed with love of Allah, hoping in His reward that I get out of bed just for Allah's sake, so that I can go wash myself and then worship Allah. Then when they would eat their breakfast, even when they would eat their food, it would be out of obedience for the sake of Allah, out of love for Allah. That I will eat this food because Allah has rewarded me with this food, and I will sustain myself so that I can keep on living and obeying Allah out of my love for Him. And we are giving the example of even after the prophets. We know after the prophets at the level of the Sahaba, and then the next generation of Muslims, and then the next generation of Muslims. And some of the Salaf al-Salih from the first three generations, when the end of Ramadan would come, or rather, when the end of their lives would come, they would cry. And they would be asked, why are you crying? And they said, we are crying because once we are dead, those who pray to Allah will pray without us. Those who fast for the sake of Allah, they will fast without us. Those who recite His Quran will recite without us. Meaning they are thinking that once we are dead, we will no longer be able to feel the sweetness of worship. That is love. That is the peak of our existence. And this is actually the crux of the whole book. That reaching that level of love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we are so focused on our purpose in life, to worship Him, to obey Him, to stay away from His prohibitions, that we do all of these things out of love. And every disease in the world, He is unbothered by it. So if it is a physical disease, He knows that the end will come and the cure will come. If it's a mental disease, He knows that the end will come and the cure will come. And because of His devotion to Allah, He is cured of all diseases of the heart. So this is the peak that we strive to reach. This is life's goal. And again, it all comes back again towards knowledge. Towards knowledge, this religion is based upon knowledge. And when the Prophet ﷺ, after he had passed away, Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he told the people in the markets, he saw some people walking around. And he told them that, what are you doing in the markets? The inheritance of the Prophet ﷺ, it is being distributed in the masjid. So what are you doing here just walking around and chatting? And so some of the people start rushing. That what is that from the inheritance? And they go and they see circles of the Sahaba and circles of the scholars and the students of knowledge sitting and sharing verses from the Quran and the explanations from the Prophet ﷺ and his Sunnah. And they said, we just came across these people sitting and teaching Islam. We didn't see any inheritance. And he said, this is his inheritance. The inheritance of the prophets is the knowledge and the way that they leave behind. And the ultimate cure to all of our problems in life is to hold on to the commands of Allah, hold on to the book of Allah, and hold on to the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one who perfected akhlaq, and the one who perfected ibadah, and the one who taught us how to live this life. When one holds on to this path, he will find that all diseases in his life, everything will become easy. Everything will become cured. The doubts will leave from his mind. The indecisiveness will leave. Things will become clearer for him. When he wakes up for Fajr, his devotion and his knowledge and his love for Allah, it will make him want to get out of bed. It will make him want to go to the masjid. It will make him, because he has that combination of all these things. He has the combination of sincerity. He has the combination of knowledge, and he has the combination of love for Allah. So when he has all these things together, he will find success and he will find a cure to the problems in his life. So with that, inshallah, we will conclude this session and we will conclude this series on the book. Again, I recommend definitely to read this book in detail. Again, I have not done it justice. The Disease and the Cure, you can find the PDF online. If you need help finding the link to this, I can help you find it as well, and you can download it and read it. So with that, we conclude. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us, to guide us, to put us upon the straight path. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put us upon the straight path and bring brotherhood amongst us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cure us of all our diseases, whether they are physical, mental, or spiritual. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us take benefit from work such as this, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us in establishing a connection with the Quran and the Sunnah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help the Muslims wherever they are in need, every corner of the earth, and especially Gaza, especially Palestine, where the Muslims are being openly oppressed. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free them from that situation and to grant them victory, to grant them sabr. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to unite the Muslims upon the haqq and to save us from misguidance and to cause us to die at a very high station of Iman and to resurrect us behind the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. So if anyone would like to add any points or questions, feel free to do so.
Particularly, you have to be to the heart. You have to start saying something. If you're not very good at articulation, the slang language, if you have anything,
Yeah. Yeah. So the question is regarding the etiquette of dua. I'm glad you mentioned that. I actually forgot to mention that one of the points as well. So the best way for dua, and the Imam mentions this as well, first and foremost, to call upon Allah with the names that He loves. So Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Hayyu, Al-Qayyum, Ya Dhal Jalali wal Ikram. And then after praising Allah with the best of His names, to send salawat upon the Prophet ﷺ and upon his family. So praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Hayyu, Ya Qayyum. Then, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad, reciting the whole salawat. And then after that, in the most respectful way, it does not, Allah knows your heart. Allah knows the heart, Allah knows the tongue. And the intention is always with respect. The intention is with devotion. The intention is with worship. So we do not have to, talk like a professor or something, or like the best du'as are the ones that the Prophet ﷺ taught himself. So we have entire lists of the du'as that he has taught us. But any specific du'a that we want to make, as long as it is with respect, devotion, and humility, and nothing inappropriate, then it does not matter. You can speak in your own tongue, in the slang that, like you said, as long as it is respectful and it is not against the etiquette of making dua. So it does not have to be formal. It does not have to be formal language. Yeah. It does not have to be formal.
all this dua people memorize, just saying memory, but they're not good at memorizing this.
Yeah, you can read them. So you can so the du'as that were taught by us by the Messenger ﷺ, you can find them in there's entire books as well, the Fortress of the Muslim. There's entire books published with these du'as. So even if you're making du'a, you can open the book. You can open the book, read it directly from the book. After doing those du'a, then you can make your own. So you can say it in your own word. Ya Allah, I need help with this. Ya Allah, I need help with this. Help me with this. Anything that you like, you can ask du'a. And again, the condition of the thing that we are asking, that only condition is that it must be permissible. It must be permissible to ask for that thing. Okay, inshallah, we will conclude with that.